There's not that many billionaires in the world. I recognize that, and there's a lot of people who'd say get out your smallest violin for the billionaires. But I would assume if you happen to be a billionaire and you happen to be an American citizen, you'd want to know how you were going to be impacted.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about a big issue in the 2024 election, Kamala Harris's campaign and why it seems to be struggling. If you've been following the news, you might have heard about her team having trouble explaining her plans. We're going to break it all down in a simple way, so stick around. All right, so what's going on with Kamala Harris's campaign? Basically, her team hasn't been doing a great job explaining her policies. One of her top supporters, Gina Raimondo, who is the Secretary of Commerce, went on TV to talk about Harris's plans. But here's the problem. She couldn't give clear answers. Why does this matter?
It has been a master class in avoiding any questions, and nothing's been made clear. She's been impossible to pin down on anything because she hasn't given any access. The American people deserve it. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, when you're running for vice president, people want to know exactly what you stand for and what you're going to do. But when her team can't explain it clearly, it raises questions.
You talked about predictability, and I think one of the questions that we've had at this table for the last several weeks, actually, since the vice president has been the nominee, is what the predictability is going to be as it relates to the details of her programs, which I think are still amorphous, if you will, in terms of what they really are. I think we don't really know. We had a debate last week a little bit with Mark Cuban, who's been having some back-channel conversations with the Harris campaign. He's hearing certain things. We haven't heard all of them publicly. How much detail on all of these plans do you believe, and whether it's from the former president or whether it's from Harris, do you think that the American people deserve before they go to the polls, recognizing, by the way, that it's not just going to the polls physically in November. In some states, you're able to mail in now effectively. And so you would want the voters to know as much as humanly possible, I'd imagine.
Yes, here's what I think is most important. Like, at the end of the day, I think Kamala Harris is being incredibly honest. She knows she has to work with Congress. You know, Trump can throw out whatever he says about this tax policy, that tax policy. You actually have to get in there and work with Congress. You know, the minutia. I don't think the American public are really interested in the minutia of, you know, the mechanism of how she'll increase taxes on billionaires. Like, here's the important point, which is what
I would assume, there's not that many billionaires in the world. I recognize that, and there's a lot of people who'd say get out your smallest violin for the billionaires. But I would assume if you happen to be a billionaire and you happen to be an American citizen, you'd want to know how you were going to be impacted.
Here's what you know. Here's what's crystal clear. Trump wants to cut taxes on billionaires and cut taxes on corporations who don't need it. It will balloon the deficit, and ultimately, it's the average American worker who will pay. Kamala Harris has been crystal clear. Billionaires need to pay more. It is wrong that a school teacher, truck driver, construction worker pays more in taxes, a higher rate than a billionaire, and she says she will fix it. Exactly the mechanism. The American public doesn't have time to study the tax code. They want to know there's somebody in the Oval Office fighting for them.
Let's talk about the big issue here, policy details. People, especially voters, want to know the specifics of what a candidate will do if they're elected. For example, one big question was about how Harris plans to tax billionaires. Raimondo, in her interview, said that people don't really care about the details of how taxes will work. But that's not true. Voters care about how policies will affect them. This is especially important in places like Pennsylvania, a swing state. People in these key states want to know exactly what the future might look like under Harris's leadership. If they don't have the information, they might not trust her to get the job done. Now, you might be wondering, what's the big deal about Pennsylvania? Well, Pennsylvania is what we call a swing state. Swing states are states that could vote either for the Democrat or Republican in an election. They're super important because they can decide who wins. In 2020, Pennsylvania played a huge role in Joe Biden's victory. Right now, the polls in Pennsylvania are really close between Harris and Trump. If Harris doesn't explain her policies clearly, she could lose Pennsylvania, and that could cost her the election. So, it's a big deal that people in these states are still unsure about what she stands for. Another thing that's been hurting Harris's campaign is that she hasn't been talking to the press much. For more than 40 days, she didn't do any major interviews. When she did finally sit down for one, it was pre-recorded and edited, so it didn't feel like she was answering tough questions. This makes people suspicious. Why isn't she being more open? When a candidate avoids the press, it can seem like they have something to hide. Voters want to feel like they're being listened to, and part of that is seeing candidates answer tough questions live. If she keeps avoiding the press, it could hurt her chances even more.
Yeah, I know you're a surrogate, but the American people are frustrated. The media is frustrated at the amount of access anyone's gotten to her for the past 41 days. I know you've seen that. We're finally going to have a debate tomorrow night, but she sat down for one interview that was taped and then cut down, and certain little things came out from it. But it has been a master class in avoiding any questions, and nothing's been made clear by her. Maybe it's been made clear in dribs and drabs from her policymakers when it comes out in print or on off a teleprompter at one of her scripted speeches. She's been impossible to pin down on anything because she hasn't given any access. The American people deserve it. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, and I hear you, but I respectfully disagree. This is a presidential election like no other. She only has a few weeks to do everything, and she's spending her time talking to Americans. She has a punishing schedule, out and about, everywhere, being with the people who she wants to elect her. But I guess, look, tomorrow night it will be on display. It'll be a robust debate. I guess from where I see it, and were I still in my old role as a governor, or prior to that I ran a business, I see in her somebody who has a vision, who's been really clear about her desire to help businesses and small businesses. You know, she talks about being, pro-business, pro-worker.
Now, let's talk about the upcoming debate between Harris and Trump. This debate is going to be a big deal because it's one of the last chances for Harris to speak directly to voters before Election Day. A lot of people are undecided right now, and they'll be watching to see if Harris can explain her policies and answer questions directly. This is also her chance to show that she's confident and ready to take on the role of vice president. If she avoids specifics again, or if she doesn't make a strong case for herself, it could be a huge problem for her campaign. On the other hand, if she nails it, it could give her the boost she needs. So what do voters really want? Most people want two things: honesty and clarity. They want to know exactly what a candidate plans to do if they're elected. This means they want detailed answers about taxes, healthcare, jobs, and other important issues. Right now, Harris's team is saying things like, people don't care about the details, but that's not true. Voters want to know exactly how her policies will affect their lives. If they don't get those answers, they're going to feel like she's not taking them seriously. So, what happens if Harris's campaign doesn't improve? Well, the polls in key states like Pennsylvania could start to slip even more. Right now, the race is super close. If she doesn't give clear answers and keeps avoiding the press, she could lose the trust of undecided voters. And here's the thing, those undecided voters are really important. They're the ones who could swing the election one way or another. If Harris doesn't start communicating better, Trump could win those voters over with his clear, direct messages.
I want to take a look at Pennsylvania, and what we see is a tightening race in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. All right, this is Harris versus Trump margin in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. A month ago, when you looked at the polls, New York Times +4 Harris, +3 Quinnipiac for Harris, Franklin and Marshall +3 for Harris. But look at polls that have come out over the last week or so, and what do we see? We see a much tighter race. We see a tie in the CBS YouGov poll. We see a tie in the CNN SSRS poll. And this, to me, is part of an emerging pattern, which is in a very pivotal state. What we saw was a small Harris lead, but within the margin of error, becoming a race that is way too close to call at this particular point, one that is even.
You say very pivotal the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania could be.
Well, this was the great question when Kamala Harris was making her VP selection. Who should she select? And, of course, folks like myself thought that she should take Josh Shapiro, of course, as the governor of the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Why? Because his approval rating is 59%. And the bottom line is, if Kamala Harris loses in the state of Pennsylvania, and that is the tipping point state, as Mr. Berman put it, the state that put Donald Trump over the top in the Electoral College, there are going to be some real questions as to whether Kamala Harris should have chosen Josh Shapiro, given how popular he is in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Could she have been a winner if she had chosen him instead of Tim Walz? We don't know the answer to that question. We don't know who's going to win the state of Pennsylvania, but it's certainly a question that at this particular moment, with the Pennsylvania polls getting tighter and tighter and tighter, that I'm certainly asking John.
All right, so to wrap things up, Kamala Harris's campaign is facing some serious challenges. Her team hasn't been clear about her policies, she's avoiding the press, and the polls are getting tighter in key swing states like Pennsylvania. The upcoming debate is going to be a major moment for her campaign, and it could decide whether she can turn things around. What do you think? Will Harris be able to pull it off? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more updates on the 2024 election.